All right, everyone. Hi, how's your PhreakNIC?
Good.
I'm 3 beers in and ready to be completely unhinged about this talk, given last year my boss censored the best part of mine. But I'm unemployed, so I got laid off, so she can't stop me. So disclaimer, this is not a cute disclaimer. This is serious, all right? My disclaimer went ignored last year and I got complaints. That ain't happening this year. Do not say I did not warn you. I do not have my boss to tell me what to do and I'm several beers in. I will not be mincing my words. This presentation may feature uncensored user input. I will be showing a live demo of scraped data. I am not responsible for what people put on the internet. I cannot control that. It will contain strong language and mentions of multiple forms of organized crime, including but not limited to human trafficking. It will also include morally gray activities and questionably legal life decisions. This is a gray hat talk. I am delivering on that title. However, because one of the sketchier demos was scrapped, y'all are kind of immune to the worst of it. So, in other words, this presentation is rated R for if there are kids in here, why? Get them out. And if you think that's funny, then thank you. Someone laughed at my jokes. No, so if you're not in the place to mentally handle this content, I completely understand. It's okay, you can ask me for the censored version after this. I'm happy to do a one-on-one. We've had enough of the election, okay? Anyways, I do not endorse crime. I don't endorse any of this. This is educational purposes only. And to the guy who booed me, we'll talk after. But viewer discretion is advised, okay? All right. So what is web scraping? Let's start at the very basics. We all know what a web scraper is. It's the tool that is created to automatically gather desired data from the internet. This data could be anything from chat logs to Reddit posts. So web scraping must be the automation of gathering that content. Okay, easy. But web scraping versus web crawling. Now, this is a distinction I know someone in the crowd's gonna get me on. You got me, they aren't the same, but we will be using the terms interchangeably because it is really, really hard to separate one from the other. Web crawling is gathering links. If you don't have links, then what are you gonna scrape? You kind of need one, you kind of need the other, but it's technically a subsect of web scraping, so it's connotation, but in case you go out there on the internet, you might need to know there is a separation between the terms. And yes, for the smart ones, that is what search engines are doing. They're just doing it way more on the up and up than we are today, because we are lazy. So traditional uses for web scraping. Yeah, don't go to sleep on me, I promise. This is gonna get entertaining in a second. Business analytics, boring. Price comparison, okay, slightly less boring if you've ever actually tried to buy Flipper in their heyday. AI training, okay, little interesting. Market analysis, marketing lead generation, also known as would you like to buy a certification program for my LinkedIn? And data preservation. What we're going to do is a little more entertaining. Tor scraping, private key hunting, crypto wallet finding, API key gathering, private paste bin finding, and evil-licious fun. But it's important to note, all of these versus all of that. The traditional uses for web scraping tend to be very data heavy. They tend to rely on terabytes of data going in and out and being stored. We don't want terabytes of data. We're actually being very specific in what we're hunting, which is why we have to kind of create our crap a little differently. Our infra has different needs. We have different requirements. But first, is my lawyer calling? Anyone hear that? Ring, ring, ring. Web scraping has had a troubled past. Legality-wise, but it is legal in most parts of the world as long as you kind of mind your P's and Q's. If the scraped data is publicly available, which means no login, we will be playing on this kind of catch-22 later. No logins allowed, which means if it doesn't log in, is it technically kosher? Historically, yes. The data cannot be protected by copyright, so no scraping Nintendo, looking at you in the back. And the scraping process does not damage the website being scraped. Okay, we're not here to run DDoSing. We're not trying to skid it up in here. We're not trying to harm the servers. We just want our data. But objection! Okay. However, if the data contains any form of PII, you might be in trouble, especially if you're running your servers out of a place with GDPR. I would be careful. This isn't exactly about scraping the data, but in how you store it. But if you're scraping the data, you're going to store it somewhere. If the data can be used, proved to, be used for malicious purposes, well, it doesn't really matter how legal it is. It's a crime now. It's kind of, from what I've read, it's kind of at the discretion of the court. So good luck there. However, the precedent set from HIQ versus LinkedIn, which was a lawsuit where HIQ, a legitimate data analysis company, was scraping LinkedIn for data. LinkedIn, data mine, data trove, lots of crap in LinkedIn, lots of crap a data analysis company would like to have. They got sent to cease and desist, naturally, and they did not cease or desist. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a lawsuit. Fast forward a little bit, and ruling was basically HIQ had First Amendment rights to the data because it was not behind a login. That's going to be useful later.
Are they the reason LinkedIn sucks ass now?
No, LinkedIn just sucks ass. It always has. It always will, but it really sucks ass today. Anyways, morality. Okay, so yes, we're gray hat, but we're not black hat here. We actually kind of care about not doing any harm. What if the robots.txt says don't scrape me? Well, that's at your discretion. Again, you are fully grown adults. I mean, I've warned you, jumpstart adult, okay? Grown-ass adults only. You can decide for yourself how much harm you're doing. But if there's an API available, use it. Seriously, it's not just good for you, it's good for the website. We're not here to take down servers. Scraping websites puts extra strain on the website. So if you have a mom and pop shop that you're trying to scrape, please rate limit, okay? We're not here to hurt people. But if you're scraping eBay, maybe don't feel so guilty. It's not fair to normal users. Okay, that is a decent argument. If you're using this to get an advantage in, like, say, a mobile game or an online game, especially when there's money involved, maybe reconsider. And if these questions are enough to bother you, oh boy, it's going to go from 0 to 60 real fast. There is exceptions here. When scraping on Tor, you will have to open multiple ports for it to be viable, which means multiple circuits, multiple connections. You're putting strain on the Tor network. That ain't bueno. Nobody likes that. So please, please, Tor scrape with caution. Don't use it if you're scraping ClearNet. There's free proxies, use those. If you are darknet scraping and you have to go through Tor to get to the data, I understand one circuit is not going to be viable for scraping. It's slow, it's lethargic, okay? I understand, but please don't open 30. That network's under enough. Just because you are a bad guy does not mean you are a bad guy. So, picking a target. What do we want? Well, like I said before, we don't really care about data analysis. We're not a company doing that. We want API keys. We want the stuff you find when dorking. We want things that people thought were hidden but aren't. So where do we get it from? Today's example is going to be Pastebin because, well, they're everyone's favorite punching bag for a lot of reasons. YT Cracker wrote a song about it. Pastebin. Why? Well, first off, everyone seems to think their crap's hidden. They select a little hidden thing on their notes. Yay, cool. It's not actually hidden. That just means it's not indexed by a search engine. It doesn't mean there's a login required. You can still access the data. And remember what I said about legality and login? Just because it's not indexed does not mean it's not public. There's a distinction here, and that's the distinction we'll be writing on today for our demo. So how do we do this without damaging the source? Pastebin's a huge website. They sell access to an API. I would buy the API if they would actually put access available for more than maybe 1 day a year every 10 years. All right, I don't want to have to wait for Pennywise to get access to an API, so I made my own. And how much of a pain in the ass is this going to be? Well, let me tell you, Pastebin, it's actually pretty easy to scrape.
Drink!
Drink! So, how long has it been since you touched grass? Before we get started, how long, everyone? A few hours, a few days? So,
I'm not answering that without my lawyer present.
in that case, me and you talk after this. But because grass makes me itchy. Reason I ask is there's several ways to go about this according to how lazy you are, how much funding you have, how viable it is, how much you really want this data. There are commercial options that are no-click. They'll make the scrapers for you. Yay! You really don't have a barrier to entry here. You can scrape anything you want. If you got the funds. I know I don't. I'm unemployed right now. I'm in between jobs. So we'll take a cheaper option. There's browser automation frameworks. Those are mostly no code. I'll be covering a few here. Have you considered a scraping framework so you're not reinventing the wheel? You don't have to do this in C. There's way easier ways to do this. But if you're like me, you're just going to end up coding it anyways, aren't you? Yep. My Python don't want none unless you got data hun. So yeah, we're using Python. Other languages exist. So all you Rust people, get off of me. I mentioned Rust, we're okay. But Rust is actually great for this, if you're a Rust person. I'm a little rusty, so we're sticking with Python. You can use Go. You can use Go. You can use Ruby. It'll get you a senior discount at the Waffle House. You could probably use Ruby on Rails. I don't know why you would. And if you use TypeScript, I'm gonna make fun of you, but you can. I'll roast you for it though. But we're focusing on Python here, mainly because the request library is fire for handling scraping, especially edge cases that say frameworks and automation frameworks don't really handle well, but it's also really easy for me to explain in demos. You know, who looks at Python and doesn't at least understand 2 of the words I'm saying? But first, we're gonna need a few things. So we need something to make the request. HTTP clients. That's how you make the request. And yes, I know, everything's over 443, it's HTTPS. We're putting it under same umbrella for the purpose of this talk. Parser. So you got the data, that's cool. You got HTML. Who wants to read HTML? Because I sure as hell don't. So we need to parse the data. We need to pull what we're actually interested in. We want the API key. We don't care about someone's picture of their cheesecake. Unless it's Hyperledger's cheesecake, which is delicious.
Right.
And
You should have made that.
we really should have. And a JSON parser, because, well, like it or not, if you're scraping, you're going to touch JSON eventually. I'm lazy. I just end up using Python to parse it most of the time. But if you have a lot of nested JSON, consider a parser. Unless, yeah, that sounds like work, doesn't it? Yeah, we're not doing that. All right, how many beers am I in? We're not doing work here. Not today. We're going to use scraping. So, heck yeah. So the thing about everything I mentioned before, it's great if you need to run a custom scraper. One of the scrapers I made today, I will be showing off, is custom. Sometimes you need something custom. Sometimes your frameworks don't just automatically snap the way you want them. Sometimes browser automation is heavy. It's not cost effective to run on larger scales. You're going to be paying more for hosting, and that means you're going to have to turn more of a profit in what you're doing to make ends meet. And I'm currently unemployed, so if it ain't turning a profit, I ain't interested. So we are going to look at these frameworks more for mentioning today in the talks, but yeah, we're not really going to be covering them super heavy. Scrapey is my framework of choice. It is so easy. Documentation, there's a 5-minute quick start guide. Use the quick start guide. See something you want to scrape? Scrape it. It will probably scrape, I'd say, 75% of the internet. We'll cover the other 25% in a bit. But it's an open source scraping framework, super easy, fabulous documentation. Telegram, if you can read Russian, it's perfect. But what can it not do? Well, browser automation is required for dynamic websites. What I mean by that is if you scroll down and it automatically loads your results, you might need browser automation. Scrapey is also super noticeable. This framework is ancient, it's been around forever, it's open source, it's great. But every website knows what it is. So you really do need some user agent masking. You need your headers. It's not stealthy at all, and it also does not handle Tor very well. So Scrapey multi-threads by default, because who's running a single core processor, what year is it? It's safe for them to assume that you're going to have more than one core in your processor. That's great, but if you're doing Tor and you need concurrent connections, Tor don't like that very much. In these cases, you'll either have to consider browser automation or custom. And browser automation, whee! So Playwright is probably the one y'all have heard of, if not Selenium, according to how old you are. If you've heard of Selenium, please go to that Waffle House for that senior discount. But Playwright is a tool that is not designed for web scraping. It is designed for browser automation, for testing. We're testing web apps on this thing. It's mainly used for testing user disability enabling features, things like that. What we're using it for, and yes, I've had several beers, so excuse me on the wording, but what we are using it for is web scraping naturally, but there is a learning curve because this is not what this tool is designed to be used for. But it is completely open source, tons of guides on it, great documentation again. I mean, it's almost like web scrapers like to, you know, scrape data and keep it or something. But it is a browser, which means it naturally has good stealth. It is browser automation. It is automating a real browser. Naturally going to be way more stealthy than something like Scrapey. It's going to naturally not trigger as many reCAPTCHA v3s as you would expect, say, Scrapey to do. And of course, there's a lot of no-code options. You're simply clicking and it's replaying those clicks. So those clicks are very human because a human recorded them. It can scrape images, it can scrape video. That's something nothing can do outside of a browser automation framework to my knowledge. In addition, it can scrape data that's rendered dynamically because once you do the clicks, if those clicks make the data render, it can then grab the data once it does the clicks. Something Scrapey can't touch. I've never used it for web crawling, but I'm gonna be honest with you. Sounds like I need another drink. Ugh, that does not sound fun. Anyways, so you have one IP address. It probably rotates on occasion whenever your ISP feels like it. You do not want to scrape from your home internet. I probably shouldn't have to say this here, but OPSEC, not SLOPSEC. That's going to be a huge point in this talk. Please, please, please do not do this from your home internet. Unless you like doing a CAPTCHA every time you have to Google something because now you're a known bot. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your kids. And don't do that to your grandma, okay? Please, please, please use proxies. But I'm using a cloud service, so I get an IP that's not mine. Okay, that's great. What do you do when that IP's burned? You will be spotted scraping eventually. Someone will find you. It happens to all of us. Please use proxies. Proxies are used to be these alternate IPs. The scraper needs to be able to rotate IPs to keep scraping. Botting is almost always spotted. And this is gray hat web scraping, so we're already crossing the line. Don't do this from your home IP. And free proxies are garbage, but it's okay. We're actually cool with garbage right now. So, free proxies harvest your data. Do not use these as VPNs. Seriously, they can see everything you do. But SSL, they have their own certificates, they don't care. Please, do not use these for VPNs. But if you're scraping publicly available data, which I've already said is the only data legal to scrape, it's already publicly available data, just use a free VPN. Now, there's issues here. They're unreliable at best and straight up broken at worst, and I will get into that in the demo. You will have maybe a 20% success rate pulling free proxies down from the internet. Yeah, that can be a problem. You're going to have error handling in your code, and I promise you Scrapey don't handle that natively, so you're gonna have to code it yourself. They will inject their own content into your crap sometimes, and that can also screw up your scraper if you do not have really good error handling. And I can guarantee you these things ain't getting legally. You're not running free proxies out of the kindness of your heart. You're running this off of a botnet somewhere. So, we're in the gray here morally. Do you really want to use these? Well, you don't really have that much of an option. Unless you want to pay for them, but there's no guarantee that those are any good either. So, just use Tor, right? Wrong. You'll have to use Tor the darknet scrape, but if you do that and you're putting that load on the network, you're kind of the worst kind of human. Like, Tor is already stressed. Don't do that to Tor. Just pay for some feckin' proxies. They're cheap. It's like $100 for it's like $100 for $2. Pay for frickin' proxies. Okay, so paid options. There's a few things to look out for. Data center versus residential. If it's residential, they're doing crime. Residential proxies use residential IPs. How do you think they're getting those? Knock, knock, knock on your door. Hey, we'll pay you for your traffic. No. They're installing crap. It's crap that you probably don't want on those machines. On people who aren't really smart enough to double check their links before they click them. Or people who are downloading sketchy torrents off of really bad trackers. So just because it's paid don't mean it's moral. That's why I keep going back to this morality theme, because you can't really web scrape without it kind of crossing the line sometimes. So there's rotating. There's pay per proxy and there's pay by bandwidth. Rotating is always pay by bandwidth. These proxies rotate every single request, and they're the easiest to integrate into your code. That's great, but you're going to be paying for the luxury of simplicity. Pay per proxy is you pay for a proxy. You can rotate them every so often according to who you're going through in your contract. You'll usually get $100 for $2 to $5 according to how much you're paying. That you burn that proxy, you burn money. Congratulations. And then there's pay by bandwidth. That's generally useless to us because if it's pay by bandwidth and it rotates IPs, then it's a rotating. If it's pay by bandwidth and it doesn't, then you have one IP and you have the same problem you just had with your cloud provider where you burn that IP, what are you doing for your life? They're shared. That means you're sharing IP addresses with other customers. If they burn the IP, then you're all burned on that website, but the chance of everyone scraping the same darn thing is low, especially given we're not doing traditional web scraping, so they're fine for our purposes. Dedicated means that IP goes just to you and you alone. That can be great, especially if you're scraping something that's super, super common. But given that, like I said, the most common use for web scraping is the traditional e-commerce reasons, that's kind of a moot point why pay the extra money. Static is useless to us because we're trying to get around having static IPs. That's kind of the whole point. And also look for free samples. There's a lot of providers out there that will give you 100 free paid proxies that kind of defeat the issue of having the free proxy reliability issues because they want you to buy their service, so they're way more reliable. But at the same time, you're also not paying money out of pocket, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Expect limited quantities and do not expect to be able to rotate them, but there are enough services out there that are offering these that you could probably go for a year without having to actually pay for a proxy if you're willing to put in the legwork. Organized crime. So as I said before, if it's a residential proxy, there's probably crime involved. There is a good chance whoever IP this is, they don't know. And a lot of these proxy providers are resellers. They're getting these proxies off people that they are just kind of blindly trusting without any real reason. So crime's almost always involved. It's going to be botnet operators selling these things. It's going to be crime groups selling these things, and you're not going to know. Some of the web's most legit proxy sellers have been found to be selling illegal proxies, and they don't even know. So you don't really know. And unless you're paying the money for some corpo to show you the chain of custody on these IPs, you're more likely to get data center ones that weren't involved in crime, but like good luck even there. So artificial intelligence. Now let's lighten the mood a little bit. AI is great. AI is awesome. Who doesn't love AI? It's the buzzword. Everyone loves buzzwords. What if you need to scrape words from images and you don't want to have to read it all yourself? What if the website you need to scrape is just unscrapable? There are some websites out there that are just really freaking good at scraper evasion. That's where OCR comes in. What if you just really want a new video card and you have to justify it to your boss? You're totally not going to be using it for Steam, I swear. AI is here for you. So, to mention, most AI integrations are just Hugging Face models that are being ran on the cloud somewhere that they're overcharging you for. You can pull these down off Hugging Face. They have really good documentation. They're actually really cuddly, even though they look kind of intimidating at first. The documentation, great. Quick start guides, awesome. And you don't always have to have an integrated video card to run some of the lower end models. This will allow literally anyone to pull down an AI model, run it locally, and then put it on your resume as an AI expert, so then you actually get a job. These are great for OCR. They're okay for CAPTCHA solving, even though AI is really not all that good at that. Isn't it just awesome? There's expensive scraping integrations that are like thousands of dollars to pull OCR in for you, or you could just run a local model and just offload the results to it. And there's some really nice tech behind Hugging Face. So I highly recommend checking out. It's just, there's something to know about AI. There's something kind of behind the scenes. Like, Yeah, I saw everyone's eyes glaze over the second I mentioned the buzzword, and you're right to call me out on that, because most of the time AI is just anonymous Indians. Alright, I got some of y'all's hopes up in here, but don't walk out on me yet. Most CAPTCHA solvers are actually people in, well, underdeveloped nations. Oh, thank you, my lord. I need a drink after this.
This talk is sponsored by Jepson's Malort.
This talk is now officially sponsored by my lord, because I've already mentioned human trafficking enough.
Cigarette butts and dirty jump socks.
Taste of Detroit.
Cheers.
Cheers. Drink. Woo! Woo! I have another shot for later because I'm going to need it.
Taste it for you.
So, most CAPTCHA solvers are actually abused to all heck people in underdeveloped nations that really could be treated a lot better. They are making pennies and working long hours to solve these CAPTCHAs, often with very little, if any, compensation. These services are usually offered per CAPTCHA solved, and you're going to be paying for these because they're usually more expensive than proxies. And they're going to tell you these are AI. They're usually not. When it comes down to it, do the world a favor, let the proxy go, you'll be saving money and not funding human trafficking. Like, seriously, it is not the first time CAPTCHA solving services have been linked to human trafficking. Do you want to give these people money? You want to keep encouraging this? Let the proxy go. So, note about OPSEC. How much crime have I talked about in this talk? How many times have I mentioned morality here? There's reasons for this. You don't really want to give these people your credit card, right? Your home address, kids' names, dog's name? No, you're not going to use your real name for this, okay? And if you do, like, legitimate companies at least have their company name. If you're doing this as a hobby, you don't even have your LLC to hide behind. How are you going to pay for these services? Like I said, you really want to hand these people your credit card? The only cryptocurrency I care about is Monero. Now, Monero is great. I may wear a tinfoil hat, but I love Monero. My last job and the last talk I gave was cryptocurrency focused because of what I did. It's the only Monero I trust. And I can say this because I am no longer with that company now. It is the only cryptocurrency that we could not track reliably. Please, 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 do not expect a public ledger to keep you private. Do research on what you're using. Most crypto coins, Bitcoin for example, public ledger, everyone using Bitcoin to do sketchy stuff. Don't. It will come back on you. Don't be that guy. And don't go buying this stuff with some Satoshi like frickin' Dogecoin. That's a public ledger and also a cash grab. It will come back on you. It will be bad news. Please run your own Monero node. There has been node poisoning attacks in the past. Run your own node. You cannot trust it if you do not host it. My boss hated Monero and vowed to destroy it. And, well, I'll put it this way, that's good enough for me to be like, use it. Anyways, change topic before I cross the NDA lines and actually get my butt sued. So she's saying I don't have money for lawyers right now. Cloud providers, and why you want them as sketchy as humanly possible for this. And it ain't just money here. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, okay, cool. If you're rich, use them. I know I'm not. This is great if you have a legitimate company. This is great if you need tax support. I'm not saying AWS is bad in any form, and free tier you can milk to the heavens if you know what you're doing. But you really don't want your name connected to the stuff. You don't want to open yourself up for social engineering attacks, and I promise you the AWS guys are not that hard to fish. Well, fish in this case. So DigitalOcean, Linode, that's a little better. They're a little more cost effective, and they're a little more lenient. They don't just like outright ban you, at least they're not known to have a history of doing that. But because web scraping is in this morally gray zone to begin with, and because web scraping is already frowned upon by so many people, and it's already got such a bad name for obvious reasons, you don't really want to stick your neck out with anything you have to put your name on. Low-end talk. Okay, now we're talking. Low-end talk, for anyone who knows, is where you get the sketchiest boxes in the sketchiest countries for cheap. They usually don't take crypto being the only real downside here. And, well, this isn't a money laundering talk, so I'm not going to tell you how to not pay in Monero. All right, y'all gonna need like 6 more beers than me for that. So, and maybe another shot more, but I still have a shot here, so ask me after. Anyways, I am going to mention everyone's favorite darknet service, the Cockbox. From the owner of Cockley, which for some odd reason was the Fed Boy's favorite emailing service for like 2 whole seconds, and then that became their claim to fame. Weird. Anyways, you can get away with damn near anything. Vincent Canfield gives no fucks and is known to not care. But that doesn't mean that you should be throwing caution to the wind and going all black hat on me here. You really shouldn't. Morality is still important, and legality versus morality are 2 totally different things. Now we get to the code. Okay, y'all are done with me running my mouth. I'm sure you're happy about that. I am happy about that too, because I need to finish this beer. So, this section was going to be way longer. I had 7 demos, and that is where that original super heavy disclaimer came from, because it was originally Tor scraping. We have 1 demo now, because demo gods hate my guts. The Tor demo is, like I said, canceled, because I probably should have seen in hindsight that doing that on public Wi-Fi was a bad idea. But
That's how you prevent correlation attack.
Hey! But let's be honest, that last bit is a good thing, because this talk is already edgy enough that Sonic the Hedgehog would be happy with me. So, we're doing some pastebin mining, and that is why pastebin has been our punching bag of today. I have written in just plain request, as minimal as possible, designed to run on a potato, a pastebin miner that goes through and randomly generates addresses for pastebin and then tests them to see if there's anything behind them. Normally it doesn't get anything, but like I said, just because it is not necessarily indexed by a search engine does not mean it's actually private. Give me a second. Gotta get back to my desktop. Everyone look at the lovely picture here of the back rooms. This is Entity 67, I believe. Actually, screw it. I'm just gonna go into VS Code EOM, okay? You don't want that telemetry on you. Code EOM. And y'all can make fun of me for not coding in Vim. I understand, I kind of deserve it. Okay, so, look at the code here, pretty simple. We're importing a few things, in Quest, SQLite, and then we have the user agent randomizer, which is, as I said before, important for stealth here. You don't want this coming from an obvious bot user agent. If you were doing this completely white hat, you would actually put in here it's a bot, so websites had the option to block you. I don't want the option to block me. I'm a bit of a loudmouth and I don't like being left on red. This is interesting. Remember how I said before, if you use free proxies, you need error handling. And now no one ever said my code was great, but this here pulls down requests from proxyscrape.com, the leading provider of really sketchy proxies that try to steal your crap. It tests the proxy, and if the proxy works, it adds it to a list. If it does not work, then it doesn't. I will show you the fail rate here in a second. It also lets me know, exactly what the error was. And then we have the pastebin generator. It generates random pastebin addresses that, according to pastebin, would technically be valid. We're just kind of trying to hit the lottery here with this thing. Then you have the main function. Of course, ignore the test bit here, but it basically makes a SQLite database, puts the data into it, and calls it problem fixed. And no, we are not setting the timeout to 1,000 seconds, because none of us are getting any younger. So, we have that. 1 second. Need to start the virtual environment. 1 second, sorry.
Make the text bigger too.
I'm not quite sure how to do that. Not quite sure how to do that on here.
Just went.
Have your chair closer. Drink it, it won't matter.
How many beers have I had again?
Line up.
I can still type, so that's the problem. There we go. There we
Control
go.
pushing the trackpad.
All right, so we got one, and we failed. Got one, and we failed. Got another, and we failed. You see, this is probably using free proxies. These free proxies are over here like, yeah, you can run your data through us. And no, you can't. This is going to try for 100 seconds to gather as many free proxies as it can, and then it's going to try to run these random pastebins to find something. Didn't find anything useful this time. But like I said, you're kind of running against the lottery with this demo. Running again. And of course you can set the timeout longer. Timed out, got one, timeout. Yeah, this is why you need error handling if you're going to be using free proxies, because the second you hit one of these errors, your program's gonna crash, and then you're gonna go back to your cloud service in 2 weeks and be like, hey, where's the scrape? Again, nothing here. Aw, man, okay. Now, the thing is, you're actually technically dealing with a few, I want to say 100,000 addresses. There's not always going to be something, and some people are actually smart, clean up after themselves and delete their bins. But again, just because it's not listed on Google does not mean it's private. So, paste bin miner. Give me 1 second, and then we'll get back to this. Now, a few ideas. Sorry.
Speed running.
No, we are not speed running the entire presentation. As tempting as that would be, I do not talk that fast. There we go. My bad. So, we're gonna take this to the moon. No, I'm not a crypto bro anymore, I swear. Anymore. I kind of had to be for work. Anyways, so, ideas, including ones I'm running right now. We have an auto dorker. It's basically taking Google dorks, running up their DuckDuckGo to the best of their ability, and automatically finding me API keys, stuff like that. Stuff that people did not really intend to be public, but things that are not behind a login, so I'm technically okay. API keys are not as easy to regex, but SSH keys and crypto wallet seeds, easy. Regex for those, simple. You can pretty much automate that. You can scrape with cookies if you need to scrape something that is behind a login. Every framework can handle that, but I cannot legally recommend you do it because remember how I said the login thing is a legality thing. Yeah, okay. I do not endorse crime even on Minecraft. So you can keep your prices down by minimizing how much data you have to load. Sometimes the mobile site will have a lot less data to load. Use the mobile site, scrape it, use mobile user agents to trick them that you are on a mobile device. Sometimes if you disable JavaScript, you get an HTML version, scrape that version. Minimize how much data you're loading because then you're minimizing how much cloud crap you're buying. If you can, write your own scraper and just use the request library. Unless you're using something that's already pretty optimized like Scrapey, do that. Don't use browser automation for everything unless you have to because it's very, very heavy. You don't want to have to spend more money on resources. And you will run into storage issues. We will be here all year if I have to go over storage. So I personally change my tactics according to what I'm scraping. But as I said before, I was running that on SQLite. You may want to learn SQL if you haven't. I just find it pretty easy. I could see someone stink-eyeing me from the crowd, so there's other alternatives. And closing. A lot of this came from r/web scraping. A lot of this came from war stories. Thank you for getting me started. If anyone in that community is in here, y'all chill. PhreakNIC, you're the best. Oh my God. I can't get this sloshed at any other conference and still give a talk. Y'all have not carried me off stage. Thank you. And by that, I mean, need more of this. And shout out to the obvious bed boy. Thank you for taking notes. You are the first person to take notes in my talk. I have been consistently running low on time in practice at this point. So if anyone included, has questions, catch me outside. And finally, did this excite you? Do you want my skills on your team? Awesome, pay me, I'll keep it up. If this scared you and you want me to stop, please hire me and I'll stop. Jones does not beat himself. He's just a cute little dolphin and doesn't understand the economics of the situation, and I don't want to have to tell Jones while we're homeless. Okay, don't do that to me. Also, remember our Lord and Savior talks, because Windows is never an option. Thank you. Thank you, PhreakNIC! And now I'll get off the stage.
I got